Welcome to Three Nice Things, the podcast that has decided we've been so mean to these movies, it's time to say three nice things. You can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Other shows on the network include Is It Classic, Does It Rock?, where we pick a band or artist and go through their discography album by album, track by track. There's Previously on X-Men, where we look back on X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. And 9021 Here We Go, a 90210 rewatch podcast. Share your thoughts on this and upcoming movies by following us on Facebook or Twitter at Nice Things Pod. And please rate, subscribe, and share this show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Today, we're talking about the 2010 film, The Last Airbender. I'm Eric Mickles, known online as duskvstweak, and with me is Chris, also known as Monkey of Evil.
How's it going? Good to be back and ready to talk some Last Airbender.
Some Last Airbender, yeah. Chris was last on the Doom episode and unfortunately has since watched Doom Annihilation.
Let's just say I'm ready for another future episode, if you know what I mean about that. But
all right, and also with us is the Avatar: The Last Airbender fan of my family, my sister Aeryn.
Hello.
Based on the Nickelodeon animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender, specifically the first season, the movie was written, directed, and co-produced by M. Night Shyamalan. We just did an episode on After Earth, and his name was nowhere in the marketing. And this movie is basically this and like the last movie before this, which would be, I think, The Happening, are the reasons why you didn't find his name on After Earth. The Last Airbender was filmed on a budget of $150 million and had about $130 million spent on marketing. Upon release, the movie went on to make $320 million worldwide, failed to meet its own budget in North America, according to Box Office Mojo. So that's pretty rough. Usually, you gotta double your budget to break even, triple your budget to make a profit. It just barely doubled it, but it made like less than half of that in North America, which is usually not a good sign. At the time of recording, it has a critic score of 5% on Rotten Tomato and an audience score of 30%. So this might actually, at 5%, I think this is the lowest rated movie we've covered so far.
Well, it deserves a rating.
Unless Battlefield Earth had a worse rating than that, I'm not sure. All right, Aeryn, Airbender fan. Are you an Airbender fan, and were you an Airbender fan in 2010 when the movie was coming out?
I was a fan, yes. I watched the actual show when it aired. Not all of it, but I was a fan, when I was in high school, so
okay.
I definitely knew.
Aeryn, you're not even just like a big fan of Airbender, though. You've told me you think it's the best show you've ever seen.
It is definitely up there. It's definitely my favorite animated show. Mm-hmm. It's a really good story. I even have a tattoo.
Do you?
I do. I have the Water Tribe symbol. It's like a friendship tattoo I have with one of my friends.
Well, there you go. You are the biggest Airbender fan I know. And since you're such a big fan, I imagine when we get to reviews, you're going to have loved this film, because it's such a straight adaptation of the animated series. Chris, what about you? Are you a fan of the Airbender animated series from Nickelodeon?
before the movie came out, I had seen the entire series like once through in its entirety, and I've seen it in its entirety since the movie's come out. But it's been a couple of years since I've seen like any of the episodes or anything. So while I would say like I'm a fan, definitely not like I wouldn't consider myself like a really big like diehard fan of the series.
Right. But you still, I mean, you've watched the series twice. That's
Yeah, in fact, like so I mentioned I watched the entire series like before the movie came out. So I saw the movie like day one when it came out, and then I just kind of got in the mood and like just binged like the first season like that weekend after. Okay. And then like I saw the movie again with some friends like the next week when they wanted to come see it for the first time. So I had like a whole week where I just had like a lot of Last Airbender in my system. So
okay.
But I really enjoy the series. I think it's like really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not something that I continuously go back to.
Sure. For myself, I think I had just kind of missed it. In terms of age-wise and everything. I didn't watch it when it was on TV, and when it was on TV, I probably didn't have TV because I was probably either in college or... I think I must have been in college when it was on. When did the show air? I should have checked that out. I didn't watch the show.
I was in high school when it came out, Eric, so you weren't too old.
I sat down to watch it. I made it about 4 episodes in, and it just didn't click with me. And so I was watching it with my friends' kids, and they were liking it, and I was just kind of accepting. I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna force myself to watch something and maybe not enjoy it as much as I can. I'll wait till I have kids. I'll watch it with them, and then I'll probably enjoy it through their eyes. Maybe that's not totally fair to the show. Maybe I would still enjoy it, but there hasn't been this like huge drive for me to watch it. Summary of the movie with spoilers. We will spoil the Airbender and I guess the first season, but you'll have to tell me how accurate that is. This movie moves pretty fast because it's basically covering 20 episodes.
One of the problems I have with this movie actually is the way that M. Night decided to pronounce the names of characters is completely wrong.
You're mad that the Avatar is sometimes called the Avatar?
Well, it's not only the Avatar, but his name is not Ong.
Sometimes it's Ong.
No, it's never Ong. It's Aang.
Okay.
And Sokka, his name is Sokka.
Mm-hmm.
Iroh, that's Iroh.
Mm-hmm.
They literally, he intentionally decided to just change the affectation of the name, and in doing so, so much rage.
Okay.
So I'll summarize the movie, but I don't want to use the way he pronounces the names.
That's fine. Go ahead.
It just sounds it's too much for me.
Okay.
Anyways, so the beginning of the movie, you have the characters of Sokka and Katara. They're out hunting on the ice. They live in the Southern Water Tribe at the South Pole, and it's in the middle of a war. And all of a sudden, they break through the ice, and there's a sphere, and there's a boy in the sphere.
And it's Ong, the Avatar.
No. Well, yes. But anyways, so Katara decides to break the ice, even though Sokka doesn't want her to, and out he comes. And then the next scene, you're with them at the village, and then the Fire Nation comes.
Yeah. And
the Fire Nation is the nation that has started the war against the Benders. They think they're the superior element because the whole thing is that the Avatar
controls all four
worlds. In the Avatar world, there are people that can bend the elements, and basically, depending on what region of their world you're from, is going to be the element that you bend.
Right.
So
water, air, fire, earth.
Right, and Katara is a waterbender.
Yeah.
And that's actually how they kind of discover Aang in the ice. But anyway, so the Fire Nation comes because when they discover the Avatar, there's a beam of light, and then you're introduced to the characters of Zuko and Uncle Iroh.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, we got to follow that. That's the Avatar, whatever. So they come and they take the Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
And he escapes, and they kind of go on a quest for Aang to learn the elements so that they can defeat that Fire Nation. That's pretty much the premise of the movie, and then they end up being at the Northern Water Tribe so that Aang can learn waterbending.
Right, and Aang apparently has the hardest time bending water out of all the elements. But he seems to have
so
have
inaccurate
an easier time with this one. Also, Zuko is technically the prince of the Fire Nation, but he's been banished by his father, and he's not allowed to return home until he's captured the Avatar.
Right.
And so he's kind of obsessed with that. Meanwhile, the general of the Fire Nation is out to capture the Avatar and disgrace and possibly kill Zuko. Also, there's a princess of the Water Nation, and she falls in love with Sokka, who that happens basically off screen. A lot of this movie is wrapped up in narration. A lot of it's told to us to let us know it's happened over time. Chris, you told us when you saw this movie day one and then you went to see it again.
Yeah, I did. And like I said, I mentioned like I saw like the first season that like the movie was based on in between like those two viewings. It is for the most part like the key plot details they get in the movie, but they just kind of assume that you know the context. Like there's not a lot of explaining going on, and there's a lot of scenes in the movie almost directly adapted like from the show, but they don't give you any of the background as to like why that scene's there. So like if you've seen the show, you're probably a little more likely to be like, okay, I know what's going on here. But the movie fails to kind of just really establish like a lot of that like kind of supplemental like details you would need.
I feel like as someone who's watched the show, I can kind of follow it along. But Eric, I can't imagine someone like you who's never actually seen the series being able to follow the movie at all.
Honestly, I think the first 4 episodes, like I watched, like I remember seeing that the Earth Nation, the Rock Tribe or whatever they're called, where they rise up. That was in just the first couple episodes. It feels like this show covers like the first 4 episodes and then maybe the last 4 episodes and take out all the middle.
Well, I was going to say that half of the movie is devoted to maybe 2 episodes of the show where they skip through
A lot.
a lot of them in the
Sure.
first half. So, in my opinion, it's just nothing really happens until the very, very end.
Aeryn, did you see this movie? You were a fan of the show before the movie came out. Did you see the movie day one, or did you not because of bad reviews? What happened?
Okay. So the first time I saw the whole movie fully through was 2 days ago.
Whoa! I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. The first time I watched the whole series the entire way through, it was on Netflix a really, really long time ago.
But then you watched it for this podcast.
Yes.
Wow, so you didn't like the movie so much you just stopped watching it.
Yeah, like 10 minutes in.
Okay. 10 minutes?
It's bad.
I did not watch this opening day. I heard a lot of complaints about it, like, when it was out. In fact, I think somebody I worked with was complaining about it. So I was like, I haven't watched the show. I'm hearing bad things about the movie. I was not on board with M. Night anymore because of Lady in the Water and The Happening. So I was just kind of like, I don't need to see this movie. Though I did eventually actually watch the whole movie all the way through in college, but I watched it with the riff tracks over it, which is the Mystery Science Theater guys, where they just record the audio and you match it up with what you're watching. And the riff tracks for the Airbender was very funny, so I had a good time watching that, but I did not like watch it by itself. So this podcast was the first time I watched it alone. I won't do that again. I found the movie rather boring. It's weird because there's a lot of color on screen, but I still find it very drab. It's a strange film. It makes, Aeryn, you were on the Dragon Ball Evolution podcast. It makes Dragon Ball Evolution seem even like more of a fun time.
I totally agree.
Because that's a bad adaptation, but like we were just kind of like, this isn't the worst thing we've ever seen. It's not a good Dragon Ball thing by any means, but
at least it's entertaining.
It's funny at times, whereas this movie is humorless. I find poorly acted. The girl who plays Katara,
Nicola Peltz is the actress that plays her.
She is. I mean, I know she's young in this movie, but she is so bad at every line delivery. I was just kind of like amazed. And you know what? I looked at her filmography. She went on to be like in Transformers, Age of Extinction. That's the 4th one with Marky Mark. And I was just like, oh boy, she has had some rough choices. Her Rotten Tomatoes like filmography is not great. So, but I even found the guy who plays what is his name? Jasper in the Twilight films. Okay.
Jackson Rathbone.
Yeah, I found him to be rough to watch. The kid who played Aang was or Aang, sorry, I'm the movie's in my head. The kid who played Aang, I thought he had to get acting lessons because he had never been in a movie before, but I probably could have used a few more of those. It's not good.
Sokka in the show is supposed to be a comic relief character. He's a very, very funny character, and that the movie has robbed the show of all of its joy.
We'll get into that. One actor did dodge the bullet. Singer Jesse McCartney was originally cast as Zuko, but had to drop out of due to his tour dates. Are you familiar with Jesse McCartney? Any of you? Either of you?
Yeah.
Oh, you are?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. He's also a voice actor. He's been in the Kingdom Hearts series and some other things. He is the whitest person you'll ever see, which brings us up to the casting controversy of this movie. The film was quickly criticized for basically whitewashing many of the roles and ignoring the East Asian and Inuit-influenced world of the animated series. M. Night told Jen Cheney of the Washington Post, "Anime is based on ambiguous facial features. It's meant to be interpretive. It's meant to be inclusive of all races, and you can see yourself in all these characters. This is a multicultural movie, and I'm going to make it even more multicultural in my approach to its casting. There's African Americans in the movie, so it's a source of pride for me. The irony that protesters would label this with anything but the greatest pride, that the movie's poster has Noah and Dev on it, and my name on it. I don't know what else I can do."
to kind of like elaborate on that, so going back to kind of what Aeryn said earlier about the intentional like name change and everything, the reason he gives for like changing like the pronunciation of the names is to, and I kid you not, be more Asian authentic in their pronunciation. As like all the characters that had their name changes were like cast mainly by like white actors and actresses, so it was just kind of like it maybe if he had like stuck with it, it would have been like
Weird.
worked better, but it's just kind of like, hey, here's this reason why we did this, and then they just don't actually like commit fully.
Right, yeah, it's not consistent. Sometimes he's Aang, sometimes he's Aang, sometimes he's the Avatar, sometimes he's the Avatar. In his quote, he says, Dev Patel is on the cover. Dev Patel was not cast as Zuko originally. Jesse McCartney was. And he had dropped out. He had already cast a white man in that role, and then Dev Patel got the role afterwards. So I don't think you get a lot of credit for your second choice. So the film was always planned to be PG, and M. Night made sure to take away the slapstick and children-focused humor from the show, which is where they changed the Sokka character around. Like you said, the comic relief elements of him instead made him kind of a straight man character. M. Night kind of described it as like taking out the fart humor. I don't know how this movie is PG when you literally show a man drowning to death. In terms of special effects, this is nice. The water and fire effects were the most difficult to render and make believable. The film was converted to 3D prior to release, adding an additional $10 million to the budget. I mean, everybody must remember, this was like right after Avatar, and a bunch of movies were doing the 3D conversion. I mean, they still do, but this was hopping on early, right after that, in like Clash of the Titans being converted, which means it wasn't filmed for 3D. It was filmed as it was and then made 3D, which is usually not super successful. The film was also criticized for adapting 20 episodes into a 90-minute film, as Aeryn has already complained about. It says like 103 minutes, but I think that includes credits. So yeah, that's rough.
It's the same story being told in about like 19% of like the runtime like converted. So it's like less than a fifth of like the screen time is dedicated to telling an entire like 20 episode kind of like story. So that really does explain like the really rapid pacing, and that's already with everything they just had to cut out because they could not fit all that all into like 90.
Well, yeah, it's like Sokka and Princess Yue are like in love, and we're just like told that. Katara is narrating the whole thing, and I think they must have added that in after once they realized like they just weren't showing enough fast enough. The creators of the animated series, Brian Konietzko and Dante DiMartino, told the voice actors not to see the movie, and they pretend the movie doesn't exist. As they told The Nerdist, all their input was ignored on the movie. This year, in 2019, M. Night Shyamalan gave the Ashok C. Sani Distinguished Scholar in Residence Lecture at NYU's Stern School of Business, and he spoke in regards to Airbender and After Earth. He said, "I did a couple of huge, big-budget CGI movies. There has always been this inexorable pull to join the group. Constant seduction in the form of whatever you want to tally, the form of money or safety, ease, not getting criticized. I did these movies, and I rightfully got crushed because they rightfully said, you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe in your own voice, and you don't believe in your values. I felt really lost. It just didn't work. There's probably something Darwinian about all this. I pay for my movies now. After this 10-year period of working at studios on junk movies, I was not happy." There were some quotes where he was defending the movie originally and his choices, but now he talks about not being thrilled with it. Apparently, and I think this is obvious when you watch the whole movie, apparently the studio was planning to spend $250 million on a trilogy. The movie ends on a cliffhanger, promising Azula, Zuko's sister, as the main villain of the movie. But a trilogy, let alone a second film, never happened. And as of the time of recording, a live-action remake is planned for Netflix with the original creators signed on to produce and run the show, according to Polygon.
That I'm more hopeful about.
That cliffhanger is at the end of the movie and not like after a little bit of credits. I think really just shows you how much of an incomplete film this is. Because when you end your movie like that, if it's an end credits, you can kind of not acknowledge it. You can just turn the movie off and pretend there was no cliffhanger like that. But when it's right at the end and you know nothing is going to come from it, that's rough to get around on rewatches, I think. Yeah, Chris, you didn't talk about this when we were talking about histories of the movie, but you are actually, you don't hate this movie.
No, I actually don't hate it. I think for the podcast, this was probably like the fourth or fifth time I had seen the movie. So while I definitely kind of like Doom, I don't think it's like a good movie by any means. And the find it at least watchable, even though it's not like entirely like enjoyable all the way through.
That's it. That's the facts. Was any of that news or surprising? I mean, this movie had like a pretty easy road to getting made, but it was afterwards that everything just fell apart for them because of the choices they made. Again, this M. Night, like, he wrote the script, he was in charge of the screenplay, he directed the whole thing. He's in charge of this movie, it seems like. I didn't read too much of studio pushback on anything. I think you can rightfully put a lot of the blame onto M. Night. He talked about taking out the humor and everything, but apparently he used to watch the show with his family when it was first on, because his daughter was a big fan of it, and it was like a big family thing for them to do. And I kind of find that hard, that like he could be watching the show and then not get that people are maybe liking the humor and the multicultural element of it, and then, you know, those things would be taken out. It's strange. Enough of that. It's time to say our three nice things of Airbender. It's not called Avatar, The Last Airbender. Two things. One, the studio has said they didn't want people to be confused with the movie that had come out the year before, Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar. But I remember at the time when this movie was being made, James Cameron saying, well, they won't be using the name Avatar. And it seemed like James Cameron was very, very adamant about no one else using that, and maybe they would have had some legal issues. Chris, you're probably the bigger fan of the three of us. In fact, I know you are. What's your first nice thing to say about The Last Airbender?
I'll start with the easy one, and I know this is like a point of contention amongst people that watch the show. And it's actually one of the things they did change from the series, but I actually like how in the movie, firebenders need a source of fire to firebend rather than just being able to do it at will. I understand
not how
and
the
recognize.
show works?
No, in the show, firebenders can just firebend like whenever. So I don't think in the show that makes a lot of sense. But I also get why people don't like the change, because it removes a lot of the threat from the Fire Nation, because they can literally just strike whenever in the show, whereas in the movie, they kind of established that only like really strong firebenders or people that are like really connected to the element can generate fire at will. And you know, I actually liked how they put a little more logic to it, but I totally get why people completely dislike that point in the movie.
Interesting. I did not know that was a thing. I mean, you're right, it makes sense, because, like, Aang needs air to airbend, and they need water to waterbend, so that kind of makes sense to me. I didn't realize, though, that was against the show. Sorry, show fans again.
I can go on like on a whole rant on like why I don't think like firebending makes any sense the way it's portrayed like in the show, but it's not one of those things that's like an issue. It's just one of those things that's just the one thing I'll give the movie. It just makes more sense to me personally that's the way it is, but I don't know how other people feel about it.
You two have seen it. Is all the hand movements and all the to-do to make the bending happen, that's not part of the show, right?
It's kind of based off of martial arts.
Right, but is that in the show?
Yes.
Okay,
it's more exaggerated in the movie. Like in the show, like whatever movements they do tend to have like the elements follow like the movement of their body. Right. Whereas in the movie, you see them do like these really exaggerated things just to like accomplish something that was a lot simpler. And
right, yeah, it seems like they have to do special moves first in order to bend in the movie. Like you said, it's not following them, but they have to, it's almost like they're casting a spell and they have to finish, you know, hand components first. It's very prolonged. I don't really get it. My first nice thing, I think the special effects look good. That might seem like faint praise, but when you're dealing with elements, I think the CGI can be very inconsistent, especially water CGI. And they talked about, you know, how water was one of the harder elements to render because of all the different components, and I think it's easy to spot when that stuff's not real. And I actually, the first time you see waterbending happening, where it's just you're looking at the ocean in the South Pole, and the water comes out, I was kind of impressed that I couldn't see like the line between the water, the real water, and the CGI. It was surprisingly well integrated into the world. And I mean, they were talking about how fire's hard. I didn't really notice it being difficult before, but it looks good. The air is fine for the most part, but in terms of the water and fire, I was actually pretty impressed right out of the gate how good the water CGI looked. So I guess that's where a lot of the money had to go.
That's actually one of my nice things as well. I thought that the bending actually looks pretty good. Doesn't look like fake fire. The air looks, airy.
Right.
So that part I feel like they did do right, and maybe that is where their entire budget went, because I can't imagine where else it would have.
The ice castle, the ice kingdom, I guess. The fire kind of has a very bouncy feel when at times. It almost 10 years old. Hey, 10-year anniversary next year. Oh, we should have saved it. Darn, I'm not good at planning these things. Thanks for hopping on to my nice thing, Aeryn.
Sorry.
That means we're right back to Chris then. Chris, what's your second nice thing about the Last Airbender movie?
Well, kind of going off of what you said about the visual effects, I think especially for the locations where they spend a lot of time in there, I love the set design and the design of the world and how they crafted it and put it on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, some of the spots where they're just there for maybe a minute or two, they don't put as much effort into, but anything that's a mainstay or has a lot of screen time dedicated to it, I don't know, I just really love the visuals of the movie, special effects and set design included.
I mean, a lot of that probably has to go then to the animated series for having good design choices, because though I don't know, I mean, do the locations look like they're supposed to from the cartoon?
Some of them do.
What about the last, I mean, we spend the most time, I feel in that ice kingdom, in that, behind that wall.
It's decent.
I think the one that stood out the most is probably just the Northern Wadern tribe area near the end of the movie. There's also
Right.
a lot of time spent there, so they had to put a lot more effort into.
My second nice thing is I have to look them up real quick. I've got them right here. I don't think this movie is well acted by anybody, but I do think Dev Patel and Sean Tobe as Prince Zuko and Uncle Iroh and Prince Zuko, I think their relationship is believable. I think sometimes Dev Patel is acting a bit much, but he's one of the few characters I believe when he's I believe his motivation, and I believe that his character actually feels that. I believe Dev Patel is angry in this movie, and also kind of frustrated with life. And you look up interviews with Dev Patel talking about the character, and it seems like he actually, really thought long and hard about how Zuko would be feeling. And I just kind of like how Uncle Iroh just seems to be. He's kind of a relaxed uncle, but he does care a lot about his nephew and just wants him to be happy, and would rather see him, instead of going back to being a prince, to just live a happy life. And I like that. Sean, I might be saying his last name wrong. Sean Tobe, Uncle Iroh, he was in the first Iron Man. He played Yinsen in the first Iron Man movie, Uncle Iroh. Trapped with him, who helped him build the Iron Man suit.
That guy is just really good at sounding exposing wisdom onto people.
Yeah, he really does. And a very relaxed wisdom too. He's like, why are you trying to build an Iron Man suit? Why are you trying to find the Avatar? It has this, but I liked them both for the most part. I felt like they were the only characters I could kind of latch onto, because one, your main lead had to take a month worth of acting lessons and probably should have taken more, and Nicola Peltz is rough to watch. Even Jackson Rathbone, he's
not good.
He's not good. The adults don't come away from this movie any better. I don't know if that's a general consensus amongst Airbender fans in general, or...
That's one of the things about the show, I think, that people really latch onto, is because they have multiple episodes where you get that character development, you see those relationships, how they develop and all of that, and it's just impossible to take all of those episodes and put them into a not even 2-hour long movie and have you successfully feel for those characters, because you don't really know them.
Right.
So my second nice thing is actually the character of Princess Yue. I think they got her very accurate, actually, to the show in terms of character design, casting, and just her mannerisms. She seems like the most believable. Okay, I watched Avatar. My idea of Princess Yue, this is the girl. She looks like her. She acts like her. She sounds like her.
Okay.
So maybe I don't know if I would say her acting was fantastic, but at the same time, when I watched it, I was like, okay, that's Princess Yue. Whereas watching all of the other characters, it's like you don't look anything like them, or you don't sound like them, or you don't act like them. Right. She was a really true depiction, in my opinion, of that specific character, and she ends up becoming the moon spirit. That is true to the story, and when you watch the show, it's very emotional for her. She wants to protect her people. It's like she's actually a really underrated character in my opinion. Like she gave up her whole life to let the world continue. And anyways, I just think she was a good choice. She did a good job. They did a good job with her at the end.
Okay.
So kind of continuing in the chain of like, I guess like the actors and stuff that we liked the best. I'm probably gonna pronounce his name wrong, but the guy that played Commander Zhao, Isif Manvis. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. I really enjoyed his performance just because he played like he just got like that prick type of like rolled down like so good. And I don't know, I feel like of all the effort put into it, like he just kind of like owned his role the most. And he was like the one like on this most recent rewatch that I kind of like enjoyed seeing the most every time he was like there doing something.
He's the one who drowned. He's the one that
Yeah, no, he's the one that got drowned like in the water bubble like at the end.
right
but
in front of the
I don't
camera,
know,
and then they were like,
I just
PG.
feel like I know it was like more of like a cartoonish kind of like over exaggerated kind of like villain portrayal, but
Yeah.
I don't know. He just owned the role and did it, and I was like really kind of enjoyed watching it.
That speech he gives about Prince Zuko in front of Prince Zuko and the army. What a jerk. He's like a child in pajamas or something. I don't know.
You remember kind of like during the Doom episode how you mentioned like for like that type of movie that like the three main characters there, like with that Carl Urban and The Rock, that they were maybe a little too good for that movie.
Right.
Like I think that's like some of the actors that we all chose were just like, oh, they were the ones that were probably just too good for like this level of like.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I have a fun fact. The character, the actress that plays Princess Yue, I did look at the IMDb after I watched the movie. She ended up going on to voice the role of Asami in The Legend of Korra.
Oh, so they must if the creators saw it, maybe they liked it a little. I have to tell you guys, and until about like 10 minutes ago, I didn't have a third nice thing. I didn't want to admit it beforehand, but especially because, that I should be very responsible about this. But I was sitting down to call you guys, and I was just like, oh, crap. Because I
told you it was hard.
The first two ones, I was like, yeah, okay. But the last one, I was just like, I don't know. Because, like I said, I found this movie to be a dull watch. But I guess my last night's thing, and this feels like kind of a cheat, because the last time we did an M. Night Shyamalan movie for After Earth, I said the same thing, and it's just because it's the same composer. I liked the music for that James Newton Howard did. I read recently, looking this up, that none of the music from the show makes it into the movie. Is that true?
Yeah, I wouldn't, if there is something, I wouldn't recognize it off the top of my head.
Okay. Well,
I just rewatched the series, so there's nothing in there.
All right. Well, I like his score for this. He's a great composer, and I mentioned with After Earth because After Earth was, seen by nobody and has a really bad reputation, that I felt like his score for After Earth was very good, and I'd feel bad. I would hope that people would still listen to his music from that movie if they didn't watch the movie. I mean, he did the music for King Kong. He did the music for Village, which was the best part of that movie as well. I guess that's it. Whenever there's an M. Night movie that's not good, you can at least count on James Newton Howard's soundtrack. An interesting style, usually a very string-heavy, violin-heavy soundtrack, it seems like, and I just need to start listening to the Last Airbender soundtrack. And just James Newton Howard in general, I guess, by himself, because a lot of people, think of John Williams or other composers. I hope James Newton Howard is getting as much listen time from other people, because I think even on bad movies like The Last Airbender or After Earth, he's delivering some good work. Nobody told him phone it in on this, and I don't think he does. So I like the music by James Newton Howard in The Last Airbender.
My last nice thing is that the way that they did the tattoos for Aang, I like the way that they did the tattoos, how it wasn't just the straight blue lines from the...
Oh, right.
I thought that, if it were a real life thing and Aang was a real person and he was, among the monks and all that, and he had to get the tattoos, I think that maybe they would look like that if you could actually see the detail, It seems like something like there was actually the air tribe symbol within all of the swirlies and all that, and I know that you probably wouldn't notice something like that, but I did.
Okay.
So I just feel like, maybe if that was a real thing from the get-go, that they would maybe look like that. So I wasn't too mad at it. They're still distinguishable, which is, it's one of the main things about Aang on the show is he's so easily recognizable because of those tattoos.
Right.
It was different from the show, but it was a good choice artistically.
That was our 3 nice things. Did it feel like we cruised through those? I gotta ask. I think, Chris, I know the answer to it because you've watched it many times already. You gonna watch The Last Airbender again?
I mean, I'm not going to go rush out to watch it anytime soon. I
Sure.
mean, the last time I saw it was probably like, God, it might have just been a year or two after like the movie came out to begin with. So it's been a while, but I wouldn't choose to watch it, but I wouldn't object to watching it.
And watching it recently, do you still have that same kind of like feeling towards it that you originally had then?
Honestly, like I probably liked it a little more watching it this time, to be completely honest.
Really?
I just don't see like I get it, but I don't like really get like how bad it is, I guess. I don't know. Like I just do not object to this movie as much as everybody.
So this movie was kind of a relief for me because we just recorded Street Fighter and we recorded After Earth. And I came away from After Earth being like, I liked it. I didn't think it was that bad for the most part. And for Street Fighter, I was just kind of like, guys, I think I love this movie. And I thought maybe like this podcast might be breaking my brain and I don't know what's good anymore. But watching The Last Airbender, like it started and I was like, oh no, it's happening again. I'm liking the movie. But the movie, like I said, it feels very drab and humorless. It just lost me completely, very quickly. As soon as Aang had to have a lot of lines and that kid started talking and I really realized how much I hated Katara, it really just became like, oh, this is rough. There's that scene where they're doing the airbending movements to nothing, just out there to the dawn. Or it may be the sun setting. I wasn't keeping track of time. But they're just out there, Aang and Katara, and the music's playing. I'm like, the music's nice, but like there's nothing to latch onto in that scene. Is that.
Yeah, I know exactly what scene you're talking about. And it's really weird because you watch that scene and you almost think like, did they just like not put the special effects for it in? But then later on at the Northern Water Tribe, they're doing those same kind of like movements without like any water sources nearby. So it's like, are they just practicing like the movements of it? Like what exactly is going on? So that's just one thing they weren't like totally consistent about with like the movements. Because, as consistent as this movie was, there had to be something they didn't get right.
and then also like at the end of the movie, the big climax is because Aang can now waterbend. He uses the ocean to make a giant water wall, and the music is very great as well at that scene. Is great at that scene. But then like nothing, the water just kind of goes back down, and I'm like, obviously he's not going to drown all these ships, but it seems like a big thing that never gets like a release.
You want to know what happens in the actual animated series during that?
Yeah.
So the exact opposite, he literally so they killed the moon spirit. He merges with like the water spirit and turns into like this giant water monster and literally just destroys all the Fire Nation ships like in the animated series.
Ha!
Yeah, it's awesome.
That did not happen in this movie. Instead, he made a big wall, everybody turned around, and then he let the wall down.
Like in this movie, they really play up the whole like in the animated series, it's done out of anger for like what the Fire Nation did to the spirit, whereas in the movie they really just kind of play up the whole like the Avatar's role. They're a pacifist, they're a peacekeeper, they're not really meant to kill and stuff. So he kind of like scares them away with like, look what I could do, but he never like actually does anything to harm them. And it's just like a really interesting juxtaposition. Like it's like the exact opposite of what that scene is like in the original.
Yeah, I mean I just found this movie to be really dull and humorless, and I don't know if the movie will make it will be on the podcast, but like the Ninja Turtles movie that was out in like 2014, people really ripped apart, and that's another Nickelodeon movie. And I brought up Dragon Ball Evolution. There are these Nickelodeon type movies that I think are passable, but this one kept thinking like, at least Dragon Ball Evolution was goofy, and it's bad, but it makes up for it in things you can laugh with. Whereas Airbender, since you're not latching onto the main characters and there's no humor to latch onto, it's just watching a lot, being told most of the time to do it. So I don't know. I'll watch it again with the riff tracks on, but
yeah, I can't remember the name of the critic, but to your point about Dragon Ball Evolution, there was like a professional critic that had like this review just posted around when this movie came out, and he made that exact same comparison.
Really?
Just all like, well, like compared to this, like Dragon Ball Evolution is like a masterpiece. So
I don't know if I would say I'd go far as saying that, but I just kind of thought like we've seen like bad kid movie adaptations before. At least they know they're for. This is a PG film that seems like it's for teenagers because of how it. I mean, all the characters are aged up from the show, right?
Well, Sokka is.
Yeah, so some of the characters are aged up, and like they intentionally took out all the humor. So it's just at this point, it's like who was this movie made for? Yeah, I don't like it. So thanks, Airbender, for making me realize I'm not broken.
I mean, being such a fan of the show, I could talk for hours about what everything they got wrong, and I know that not everybody wants to listen to that. Just, M. Night says he's a fan of this series, and that's what, compelled him to make it, but it's kind of like he didn't absorb the message behind the story because the things that he got wrong are just so wrong.
Right.
I can't even begin to describe how much I hate this movie.
Okay. I feel like even if you take away the namesake, which the movie did in a lot of ways, I still think this is not an enjoyable film. Chris, do you watch this, Chris, as an adaptation of the show, or do you see it as something separate?
Some like weird like half between point. Like I don't ever watch adaptations of anything expecting an adaptation, which is probably why I don't like think as negatively. And plus things like the name change, I actually got introduced to by seeing like a kind of like pre-release making of that Nickelodeon put out, so I didn't have like that initial kind of like, wait, what are they doing with it type of reaction in the theater. I already knew those things going in. I don't expect it to be a direct adaptation. Like I said, there's actually a lot, like some people say it has nothing to do with the show. There's a lot of things they do adapt. It's just really weird what they choose to adapt and what they omit.
Well, they put that giant dog dragon in, so that's nice. That seems like something you would cut when you're adapting, like something so weird and probably expensive. But I guess that's a nice thing to say. Like, kudos for them to putting that in.
That's not the thing you would have wanted to cut. Trust me.
That's as nice as we're going to be on this episode, and we weren't even that nice talking about the reviews there. Thanks to Aeryn and Chris for watching this movie with me. Chris, where can people find you?
You find me on Twitter at xmonkeyofevil.
Also, as we said on Doom, it's coming up to Doomcember for you, the month of the year, December, where you play a whole bunch of Doom games. Yeah,
gonna get that going. Get the ball rolling sometime soon. Probably more in November with like the release of Doom Eternal. But you can follow all that over on twitch.tv/xmonkeyofevil there.
And Aeryn, where can people find you if you want to be found?
But I am on Instagram. You could follow me at Aeryn in Wonderland, and Aeryn is spelled Aeryn. That's all one word.
Like Aaron's son from Farscape.
Right now I am participating in Inktober, which is there's a different prompt for every day. You have to draw a picture. You have to use ink. I've never done it before. I always thought it was kind of cool, so I am trying that out.
Okay, cool.
So like drawing, nail art, makeup, kind of just a hodgepodge.
And I'm duskvstweak everywhere online. And apart from other shows on the Radio Meanwhile Network, I'm the co-host of the podcast, The All the Books Show. And I also host a weekly video game remix radio show that you could find the episodes on YouTube as well now. Thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Join us in upcoming episodes as we say more nice things about bad movies. And again, you can find more about this show and others like it at the network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Please follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Nice Things Pod. Please rate, subscribe, and share this show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. See you next episode.
3 nice